Hi, I'm Jack Draper. Shout out to QualityShot Tennis.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's another preview and prediction video, and it's an absolute cracker, I have to say, because this is a highly anticipated matchup between Barbora Krejcikova and Aryna Sabalenka in the WTA Miami Open 2023 tournament for the round of 16 as well. Can you believe it? And it's a replay of the Indian Wells matchup that they had about a week and a half ago. Again, that was also in the round of 16 as well. And this is a really interesting matchup because of the clash of styles, and also because these two players, alongside Rybakina and Swiatek, seem to be the four most competitive and informed players on tour right now this year. Before we get into it, though, remember to hit that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and also do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, thank you so much to all our members. It is genuinely greatly appreciated, and all your contributions go back into the channel and hopefully give you guys even more content and even better quality content going forward as well because of it. Okay, let's get into it then. So Krejcikova and Sabalenka, both players have won a Grand Slam apiece, of course. Krejcikova won Roland Garros a couple of years ago, and for Sabalenka, she won the Australian Open this year, so she's, I think, broken through in terms of having a career breakthrough anyway, and it has definitely turned a switch, I think, for her. She was there or thereabouts. She was always, she was number 2 ranked at one point at where she is now as well, but she'd won a couple of Masters, and she was looking pretty good, but never seemed to break through and even make a Grand Slam final. So she made her first Grand Slam final this year, won it against Rybakina, really good win. For Krejcikova, she had what some people might call one of those blip victories where she won a Roland Garros, hasn't made a final since, but has been plagued with injuries and also some mental health issues. So she seems to be like she's close to back to her best, which is only good for the tour because she's a fantastic player. Okay, let's talk about, first what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. So talk a little bit about their head-to-head, then we're going to talk about their form, and then we're going to talk about how the match might play out. Because when I talk about the head-to-head, I want to also talk about their last 2 previous meetings, so Doha and then Indian Wells as well, and also try and feed that into some of the tactics that might be employed in this match and how I think it's going to go, and then ultimately give you guys my prediction. So you can see here the head-to-head record is a 3-1 in favor of Sabalenka. But yeah, only 1 win streak because Sabalenka won the Indian Wells, but Krejcikova beat her in Doha a couple of years prior to that as well. Sorry, a couple of weeks even prior to that. So there's been 2 matches very recently, and it's 1-1 this year. In terms of official rankings, we know, yep, 2 and 13 in terms of official rankings. But what we're really interested in is not necessarily these things, but it's the past meetings here. So you can see here, I mean, Sabalenka beating Krejcikova 6-3, 2-6, 6-4 in Indian Wells in a pretty tight match. Then Krejcikova beat Sabalenka in a pretty bizarre match, to say the least. I mean, she got bageled in the first set, like completely and utterly outplayed. And then there was a second set tiebreaker, which almost seemed like it could be a make or break. Sabalenka obviously takes that, she wins in straight sets, but I think maybe it's not too dissimilar maybe to that Rybakina loss recently that Sabalenka had in the final of Indian Wells. She lost the first set tiebreaker. It was a really tight tiebreaker as well. And then in the end, she managed to go on to then lose the match in the second set. And it just seemed like that first set, given it such a long tiebreaker, whoever was going to win that was going to go on to win the match. And maybe that's something that happened here as well, because she breadsticks Sabalenka in the decider. Before that, the last time they played was in 2021, so I don't think we really need to delve into that too much, but these 2 matches are the ones I really want to talk about. So before we get into current form and how they've looked against other players, because I think we both know both players have looked good generally for the last couple of months, and for this year, we know they've been playing some good tennis. Tactically, there's some really interesting things to look into, and we're going to touch on that in a second, because what I want to do first is I do want to just very briefly look at their form in terms of who they've beaten. So Krejcikova beat Madison Keys in a good win, 7-6, 6-3. Sasnovich as well in straight sets. So those are two good wins for Miami so far. You can see here Sabalenka obviously stopped Krejcikova in Indian Wells. And Krejcikova also beat Wang, Yastremska, and a couple of others as well, which is good. That's some pretty good wins there. We don't need to go through all of hers. For Sabalenka is the person who I'm more interested in because she's had some decent wins as well. Beat Buzkova 6-1, 6-2, really good win there. Shelby Rogers was a tough one. She was a breakdown the second set, recovered nicely to win 6-4, 6-3. And of course, before that, lost the final of Indian Wells to Rybakina. So those previous two encounters that they had are very, very interesting. Very, very interesting in the sense that for me, you know, given that it was a 3-0 head-to-head going into that debate match, the fact that Krejcikova recovered the way she did, and then they also had a 3-setter in Indian Wells, to me, signifies that this head-to-head in this matchup is now very competitive. It's not going to be super one-sided, I don't think, going forward. So what did Krejcikova do in debate that's changed, I think, or caused Sabalenka problems? And not just in debate, but also Indian Wells. Well, her game is very, very, we know that. We know that for a fact. I think one of the things that makes it pretty tough for Sabalenka is the backhand-to-backhand exchange. Now, we know that Sabalenka generally hits the ball extremely hard, not just off the forehand, but off both wings. She has great power and acceleration through the court with her ground strokes, and her game is built upon power and being able to really just control points with that power. She hits a high proportion of winners and also hits a high proportion of aces as well. So she's a very aggressive type of player, always looking to be on the front foot. Now, what Krejcikova can do quite well, especially on the backhand side, is soak up that power and that pace and deflect it pretty efficiently. She doesn't hit the ball as hard as Sabalenka, but she's able to stick with her in the ground stroke rallies for the most part. And that's what's pretty impressive. She does utilize a slice at times as well to try and disrupt rhythm. It does work quite well, I think, against Sabalenka, who does want, if she, well, let's be honest, she would prefer the ball to come at her at the same pace consistently, because it just means it's a lot easier to tee up those powerful ground strokes. Whereas if you have someone on the other side of the net who's able to effectively chop and change their pace, their speed, their spins, it does become a lot harder to dictate proceedings and really be on the front foot and dominate as you'd like. And Krejcikova has that in the bag. She does. She has that to lean upon. I think the biggest thing for me about Krejcikova is in the backhand to backhand, she is able to go line and go line early. Not only is she able to go line early, she can hit winners as well down the line. Her backhand down the line, to me, is something that is really important in this matchup, because I feel with Sabalenka, against most people, in the backhand to backhand, she just will induce an error, or she'll hit a winner, or the opponent will give her a shorter ball, she'll put it away. There's not too many players on tour that are able to soak up that backhand of Sabalenka's and then go line, and not even just go line and, you know, change it up and change direction and put her on the back foot, but actually hit winners down the line as well. And she does that effortlessly at times by the looks of it. And her two-hander is one of the best on tour, I would say, especially the backhand on the line is one of the best on tour. So that's a big positive for Krejcikova. And what Sabalenka, I think, will try and look to do is try and get out of that pattern, because I think in the backhand to backhand, for one, I don't think Krejcikova wants to stay in that too long either, because she knows that the ball's going to come back harder and harder. And two, for Sabalenka, she probably doesn't want to stay in it because she knows that it's just a matter of time until Krejcikova pulls the trigger down the line and she could be in trouble. So it'll be interesting to see who pulls the trigger first and goes line. I think with Sabalenka, she goes line too early, she could make more mistakes. That's the only issue for her, because she does hit the ball relatively flat. As well. At times, she's looking to accelerate through the court with a lot of power. So that's an intriguing matchup to keep an eye on. One thing that Krejcikova also has been doing really well against Sabalenka, and generally as well, is approaching the net and trying to finish points off at the net as well. We know she's a very good volleyer. I know she's an extremely good doubles player. It doesn't always translate to being a very good volleyer in singles, but she is generally a very good volleyer. Now, what that means is she's able to add a different dimension to her game that not a lot of girls on tour have, or have in a, let's say, they don't have that extra effective layer to their game. Some girls will come to the net, or some of the ladies on tour will come to the net, but they don't necessarily maybe have the hands that someone like Krejcikova has. She has very good touch and feel, and what she did pretty effectively in the last two matches against Sabalenka is approach at the right times. There are definitely periods where she was getting past the net. That can happen. Sabalenka is a very talented player, and if the approach shot, sorry, even isn't good enough, then you'll get punished, and that's part and parcel of coming to the net. You're not always going to have 100% success rate at the net. It's very, very rare anyway that happens. So what I would say is for Krejcikova, though, if she sticks to that game plan, that will be pretty useful, I think, against Sabalenka, to add a different dimension and layer. For Sabalenka, of course, she'll be looking to avoid Krejcikova coming to the net and trying closing off the court as well, and trying to avoid her being on the front foot and coming forward. So that'll be interesting to see how that matchup, or that specific game plan, whether it comes to fruition or not. So that's two different kind of views in terms of tactically how Krejcikova's had some success against Sabalenka and why she has. I think the other one is defensively, she seems to be very good. She can slice and dice. She can stretch out the point. Now, Sabalenka, if this was Sabalenka from a year and a half, 2 years ago, she probably would have lost the last two matches against Krejcikova, because not just, the Dubai one she obviously lost, but I think she would have lost the Indian Wells one as well. However, this Sabalenka is a Sabalenka that has composure, keeps her shape, and she doesn't get frustrated and try and go for broke too early. For the most part, she's actually very composed, and that is really dangerous with someone who hits the ball so hard, so cleanly. If they have that composure and wherewithal to think, you know what, I'm not going to pull the trigger too early and go for a super high risk shot here. I'm going to wait it out and find the right opportunity. Then it becomes a deadly combination. And we saw that against Krejcikova in the last two matches as well against Sabalenka, is that Sabalenka, in the past, she would get frustrated and she would make mistakes when Krejcikova would defensively say, make her play an extra shot, an extra 2 shots, an extra 3 shots. Instead, she was taking her time, saying, okay, fine, and just hammering away until, either Krejcikova would succumb to an error, or she would be able to hit a winner, even, and a very easy winner into the open court. So I think that's very impressive from Sabalenka, and it's definitely a change we've seen since the Australian Open, no doubt. That has really been a massive confidence booster, and it's definitely affected her form in a positive way. The other thing is going to be the serve. Now, everyone talks about Sabalenka's serve and the double faults, and I don't think that's necessarily a massive issue right now. I think the biggest issue is how many first serves she's making, because she didn't make a huge amount of first serves against Rybakina at times. In important moments, she needed it and didn't find it. I think she needs to find that first serve against Krejcikova. Krejcikova is a very good returner, and on the second serve return, I don't think she's going to have as much success as she would against other players. Krejcikova will pounce on that. Similarly, I think Sabalenka will pounce on Krejcikova's second serve, will try to. Krejcikova has also got a very effective first serve, but I think both players, it's not necessarily the case that they've got weak second serves. I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's more a case of both players are aggressive on the second serve return, and they're trying to look to get on the front foot. Krejcikova's backhand return as well is very, very good. So it'll be interesting to see whether both players are able to raise their level and hit a high percentage of first serves. And if so, we could see a tiebreaker or two in there because of it. So those are some interesting points. Of course, forehand to forehand, I think if I was Krejcikova, I would try to avoid hitting a lot of rally balls into the forehand of Sabalenka. You'd only go into the forehand, I think, if you're trying to drag her out, or it's a very deep shot into the corner, or you're able to attack the forehand. I think rallying balls into the forehand, you're just asking to get punished, I think, and that's what Sabalenka does on the forehand. She just is so clinical on that side at the moment. It's crazy to see. The one thing I want to say, though, is I think it was at Indian Wells, Krejcikova was hitting a lot of lines, and it did frustrate Sabalenka, and it did affect her game a little bit for a part of that match. So she needs to just keep her cool. I think she will. Her composure's been a lot better, as I said, in the last few months. So it's an interesting matchup. In terms of my prediction, well, the preview here for TNNS says 65% apparently is the win predictor for Sabalenka. In my preview, in my draw preview for Miami, I picked Krejcikova to get revenge over Sabalenka. I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen now, given what I've seen from both players and how Sabalenka has been playing, and also discussing as well how they've been playing. I think I can see either Sabalenka in straight sets or Krejcikova in 3. I think if it goes to 3, Krejcikova wins. I think if it goes to if it's only 2 sets, then Sabalenka takes it. So I think that first set could be really, really crucial, because if Sabalenka takes it, I think she probably goes on to win. I think for Krejcikova, she wins it, it'll go to 3 sets potentially, or she might win in straight sets as well. But I think, probably 3 sets for me there as well. But it should be a really tight and competitive match, so I'm very much looking forward to it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I guess it's a bit of a cop-out prediction, so I'll just say Sabalenka in straight sets, in 2 tight sets, probably a tiebreaker, and I think she'll win a tiebreaker, probably in the first set, and then go on to win maybe 6-3, 6-4 in the second set. These courts are slightly quicker than Indian Wells, and that probably plays into Sabalenka's game a little bit more. They're not quick by any stretch of the imagination, but they're quicker than Indian Wells. And I think Krejcikova's game is actually more suited, even though she's got a very good all-court game, to the slightly slower surfaces, especially in this matchup as well. So let me know your thoughts anyway on who you think is going to win. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you in the next video.